Hey everyone, George here. It's 3 a.m. and I can't sleep, so I decided to continue working on my game. So why don't I talk to you about the progress I've made so far with it. As you can see, everything's highly accelerated, but this is sort of what I've been doing over the last few days. In this particular case, I'm making a really simple little robot creature, and I basically just needed something with a simple animation, a walk cycle going on, so that I would be able to have something that is moving towards, or at least is making an enemy inside of my game. Before I was using a slug model that I had created for another project. This is just me jumping through Maya, and I gotta say, if I do have a weak point when it comes to Maya, it is probably in the area of animation. A little bit of time to set up, but here we go. We're back in Unity now, and we're setting up a very simple script. Now I do jump back and forth. I'm considering using a behavior setup, and by behaviors I mean things like running, seeking, fleeing, stopping, and so forth. Very popular way of handling artificial intelligence inside of a video game. Time to time I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, and as you'll see as I go from the script back and forth, I do change it quite heavily. In fact, I even end up changing the enemy to becoming an exploding enemy instead, where the idea is that these guys don't actually do any damage directly through like firing of lasers or something. Instead, their proximity to a location is going to be what ends up, basically blowing stuff up. Now I'm in the tower manager because I realized the enemy itself is going to need to be able to access a target. A tower manager is going to need to hold reference to all towers that are created and then provide that information to anyone who wants it. So the tower manager ends up becoming, pretty much a singleton object that anyone can access and then get information about towers that are available. And then here I'm dealing with creating the towers, and this took a little bit of time. Creating the towers was a little bit of a pain in the rear. At first I thought I was going to instantiate everything, but in reality I decided to go with resources and move all of the enemy objects as well as the tower objects into the resources folder. This way I can pull the information in, and I hadn't had a whole lot of experience with messing with the resources folder before, so this was a little bit new for me. But as you can see, I'm also going through naming convention hell, where I keep changing the names of things to things like prefab underscore or totem or tower or whatever not you you think it should actually be. And then just once again moving things around, making sure they're in the right place, trying to figure out how to get a random tower. So I'm creating a simple method that will provide me a range of different potential types of tower. So in this case I have 4 different kinds of tower, and depending upon the value that's returned to me from my random function, I will then determine which tower this particular enemy is going to go for. Once again, of course, always looking up documentation and making sure I know exactly what I am supposed to know what I'm doing. Here we go. That's when I make it into my singleton object by adding it to awake so that other classes are going to be able to access the information there. And this is when I just start really transforming how this whole thing works and basically testing to make sure that things are actually working properly with my instantiates and my prefabs and so forth. And this is where I actually learn that loading things is in and of itself what you want to do. You don't want to necessarily instantiate when you load, because if you do that, well, the object's going to be there immediately and you're going to have, well, pretty much nothing to do. Now I'm finally back in the enemy manager and I'm trying to get this guy to actually do something now that the tower manager itself can produce towers and you can access the tower manager for information. And here I'm adding a seeking behavior to it. The idea, the intent being that you'd add all these different behaviors and the object would act appropriately. Now I've created a new scene just with the exploding robot because I ended up having problems. The enemy manager now is going to have a list or a series of enumerations of every kind of enemy possible, and I can choose whatever enemy I want to spawn at any particular location. So this, of course, required me to go back and revise not only the enemy manager, but also enemy itself, and that's when I also started moving things into the resources folder so I could pull any enemy out that I felt like choosing. Now at this point I'm debugging things because my enemies aren't actually popping up properly, getting quite a few null reference errors. So just going through making sure that everything gets grabbed, especially the components. That's a big problem. Once again, continuing to fish around in enemy manager, trying to get this whole resource loading and instantiation thing working properly. like I said, first time messing with the resources folder instead of directly just having access to an object. So it did take me a little bit of time to get used to how that whole thing works. Now I'm moving everything back into the whole loading element where I load these prefabs in, and once I have them, I can make copies of them using the instantiate function or method over and over and over again. Now we're in the on GUI section, and I'm actually in a new scene, or I should say I took the old scene, deleted out all the elements, and I have now decided to work on simply spawning the towers and making them actually pop up in the correct places. Now what do I mean by that? Well, the functionality that I'm committing right now is the fact that the 1, 2, 3, and 4 key are how you choose different towers, and you will left mouse click onto the ground anywhere, and that will then spawn the tower at that location. Running into a lot of problems with certain totems. Most likely I've got some sort of an issue or error going on with how that totem is described. Some totems work, like the ice shard totem and so forth, but other ones don't work at all. And here I am once again just trying it out, testing it out. There's the ice shard totem, which seems to work just fine. I press the 3 key or 2 key, I forget which one it is, and I can spawn them wherever I want to. But as soon as I try my fire totem, well, the whole thing breaks on down, and that's when I pretty much decided to take a break from making this whole thing work. There it is. There's the break. That's when Unity crashes, and Control-Alt-Delete out of that whole thing. Thanks for watching.